open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Hello everybody, it's the 9th of May 2015, this is UCY.TV with the Solvinur Event, and I want to mention something I heard on Reality Bites. I think it was Thomas Sheridan who pointed this out, but could be some other host over there. And it just popped into my mind because when I call UCY to make the radio, I also see the picture of my own Skype thingy. And you can actually see the snap moment of when the towers start crumbling into nothingness. And I figured, oh, that's 9/11, right? And the thing about that is he pointed out, well, why do you think they use those numbers? You know, you don't say, what is it, 25/12 for Christmas, right? Or any of those other days. You say May the 1st or whatever, you know. But 9/11 then are numbers. And that has to do with mind control, he explained. And I think that's very correct. You know, when you hear 9/11, people jump into some kind of mode. You know, I'm talking about ordinary people here now that still think it was Osama bin Laden who did all of this. And so it's trauma-based mind control, right? I just wanted to mention that. It just came into my mind. Yeah. How you doing, everybody? What's up? It's 4 p.m. in the Netherlands, and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to continue with Larkin Roses, the most dangerous superstition. If you go to ucy.tv, mouse over shows, you will see a lot of shows that are available at UCY. And if you click on any of them, you get into a page where you find the chat room. It's ucyradio.chatango.com. And there's a couple of people there already making remarks like, some people have always controlled and orchestrated both sides. Well, I'm talking about war, for instance. You will find that the financiers finance both sides. Right? They always get out of it richer. And so JJ also says, so really Nazi and commie are just words for us to fear and fight over. Yeah. I thought they were on the same side though, JJ. I still don't get why these Nazis started attacking Russia. It's insane. Their political philosophies are so close together. They're both leftist. Nazi is National Socialism, which is a slow way of communism, right? And also, communist had to do with, what you call them again, guys in the chat, help me out. Political party that rose up with Trotsky, I believe. Financed, by the way, by American banks. Bolsheviks, yes, right? So there's another reason why these two should have actually been friends, right? Good morning, Vince and Anon. JJ Road still there. Don't know if he's really there, but 3 Anons. Welcome everybody. Cap Gringo. And that's Hans is also there. So check it out if you want to see the chat, guys. Sometimes I comment on it. Makes for a rather strange radio event for the people that, you know, listen to YouTube or whatever. But if you have any questions, doesn't have to be on topic, I can try and answer them. You can put them in the chat. Please use capital letters so they really stand out to me. Okay, we got all the windows set. This is my PDF reader. Ta-da! So let's pick this up where we left off last week. Block and Roses, the most dangerous superstition. We're in the last chapter. And it goes, even randomly selected rulers, when given permission to forcibly control everyone else, will quickly be corrupted and will become tyrants. But average, decent people are not the ones who desire power over others. The ones who seek and obtain power are usually already narcissists and megalomaniacs. People with a never-ending lust for power, who love the idea of dominating others. And the desire for dominion is never driven by a desire to help those who are being dominated, but always by a desire to empower the controller at the expense of those whom he controls. Yet people continue to echo the claim that the average person, if guided purely by his own conscience, would be less trustworthy, less civilized, and less moral than if he sets aside his own conscience and just blindly does whatever the tyrants of the world tell him to do. If each person relied on his own judgment, that would, by definition, be anarchy. While widespread obedience to authoritarian tyrants, by definition, constitutes law and order. Note the drastic contrast between the usual connotations of those terms. Anarchy, sounding scary and violent. Law and order, sounding civilized and just. And the real world result of the following: conscience versus following rulers. I think there's something missing in there. But yeah, it's conscience versus following rulers. The level of evil committed by individuals acting on their own is completely dwarfed by the level of evil committed by people obeying a perceived authority. Somebody's giving a definition of something I said, Bolshevik, Russian, one of the majority, is that so? Huh. Plural Bolsheviks or Bolsheviki, member of a wing of the Russian Socialist Democratic Workers' Party. Well, that sounds exactly like NSDAP, right? That's strange. That's a cover, because these were ruthless people. Which, led by Lenin, is that so? Seized control of the government in Russia, 1917, and became the dominant political power. Is that so? Is he led by Lenin? Interesting. Weren't they financed by Trotsky, Hans? Can you figure that out for me? Because I think I remember that. Continuing. Though many imagine teaching obedience to authority to be synonymous with teaching right and wrong, the two are actually opposites. Yeah. Teaching children to respect the rights of every human being and teaching them that committing aggression is inherently wrong, well, I would say initiating aggression, something like self-defense, right? He's already pointed as much out, so is very important. But teaching them that obedience is a virtue and that respecting authority is a moral imperative will make them grow up to either advocate widespread large-scale aggression or to participate in widespread large-scale aggression. Every statist does one or the other, or both. In fact, teaching obedience dramatically hinders the social and mental development of children. After having grown up in a situation where they were controlled by others, rewarded for obedience and punished for disobedience, if they ever escape that situation, they will have little or no training and little or no experience or practice in how to think and act from morals and principles. Right? Having never exercised their individual judgment and personal responsibility, knowing only how to do as they are told, they will be like trained monkeys that have escaped, but that have no way to cope with a life of freedom. In their upbringings, if their upbringings have been molded mainly by controlling authority figures, people become existentially lost if that control vanishes. Yeah. In short, people trained to obey authority do not know how to be independent, sovereign, responsible human beings, because all their lives they have been intentionally and specifically trained not to follow their own consciences and not to use their own judgment. So the indoctrinated, when they escape one institutionalized control setting, like school, hallucinate another authority to take its place. Government. The escaped monkeys simply build a new cage and eagerly jump into it, because that is all they know, and all that they have ever known. Anon says the Rothschilds, through Milner, planned the Russian Revolution, and along with Schiff, banker family, who gave $20 million, Sir George Buchanan, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, the partners of J.P. Morgan, who gave at least $1 million, Olaf Aschberg, alright, that's how you pronounce it, guys, if you ever need to pronounce that correctly, it's Aschberg, one of the Ney Bank of Stockholm, Sweden, the Rhine-Westphalian Syndicate, a financier named Jovotsky, whose daughter later married Leon Trotsky, William Boyce Thompson, a director of Chase National Bank, who contributed $1 million, and Albert H. Wiggin, president of Chase National Bank, helped finance that. Alright, Anon. If you ever do that, it's fine with me, but on air, I like to quote sources for that. So if you can paste also a source with that, so that people can check it for themselves, that would be great. In a world without the authority myth, on the other hand, children could be taught to be moral instead of merely obedient. They could be taught to respect people instead of respecting the inhuman, violent monster called government. That they could be taught that it is up to them not only to do the right thing, but to figure out what the right thing is. As a result, they could grow up to be responsible, thinking, useful adults, members of a peaceful and productive community, instead of growing up to be little more than cattle on the farms of tyrants. Which brings us to the next heading, which is called No Master Plan. If tomorrow, by some miracle, hold on guys, everyone in the world let go of the belief in authority, the vast majority of theft, assault, and murder in society would immediately cease. All wars would end, all robbery in the name of taxation would stop, all oppression carried out in the name of law would cease. The people as a whole, including the perpetrators, victims, and spectators of oppression, would no longer view such acts of aggression as legitimate. But there would be another, less immediate change as well. The belief in authority is, in essence, a psychological cage. Yeah. Mind control, right? It trains people to believe that they do not need to judge what is right and wrong. That they do not need to take upon themselves to fix society. That is all that is required of them, and that they play by the rules and do as they are told, while looking to leaders and lawmakers to handle the problems of society. In short, the belief in authority trains people to never grow up, to always view the world as children view it, an incomprehensible, complicated place that is, and will always be, someone else's responsibility. Whatever the problem, poverty, crime, disease, economic or environmental trouble, the indoctrinated statists are always on the lookout for some leader to elect who will promise to fix things. In one way, a world of authoritarian functions functions exactly the way a kindergarten classroom does. If anything goes wrong, if anything outside of the predictable pre-planned, centrally controlled agenda occurs, the children call on the teacher to fix everything. The entire authoritarian environment of a classroom teaches the children that they are never in charge. It is never up to them to decide what to do. In fact, They are strongly discouraged from ever thinking or acting on their own. After all, if they were allowed to think and make their own decisions, the first decision most of them would make would be to walk out of the classroom. Likewise, adult authoritarians also are constantly told that one should not take the law into his own hands. The people are trained to call the authorities whenever there is a conflict or other problem, and then meekly do whatever the government enforcers tell them to do. Alright, this one isn't working. Get another one. There we go. If there is any dispute between people, the people are told that they should always run to the masters, whether by calling the police or by going to authoritarian courts to settle disagreements. When discussing societal challenges, the well-trained subjects of the state talk in such terms as they should pass a law, ... or they should make a government program, ... They view their lives as a part of a giant centralized master plan, so it logically follows that if they want their lives improved, the solution is to petition the planners to change the plan. Yeah. Last was I logged in to Facebook because I get these emails and people want you to like their page, you know, so I click on that and see if I do like the page, and if so, then yeah, like Chococelli, I got an email from him. And then I usually go to the home page, I think it is, and I scroll through a couple of things. And there you find that there was a few comments underneath this pasted picture of we should ask politicians to do this better and that better, and we should ask politicians if they would go to war themselves, and we should ask politicians this and that and such and so. And there were a couple of words beneath that from other users that said, well, yeah, I agree, and yeah, we should ask that, and things like that. You know, that shows that you're still not thinking, right? So I wrote under there, asking politicians anything is acknowledging their right to rule. Right? That's what I would call an awake view of what's going on there, right? This view is so ingrained in the masses that many people literally cannot comprehend the idea of individuals living their lives without being part of anyone else's master plan. This is demonstrated by the common response authoritarians have to the idea of a society without rulers. Almost without exception, a statist who ponders a stateless society will begin by asking how things will, quote, work, unquote, without a ruling class. He does not ask this simply because he's curious about how roads, defense, trade, dispute resolution, and other things might function without government. He asks this because he has always been trained to view human existence inside the framework of some centralized, forcibly imposed master plan, and is literally incapable of thinking outside of that paradigm. Yeah, the question when he asks, well, how will things work without a ruling class, is not because he really wants to know. He's actually implying that it wouldn't work. That's what the thought behind that is. And so he will ask how things will work under anarchy and will refer to it as a system, imagining it as a new type of master plan to be inflicted upon the masses, when, of course, it is the exact opposite, a complete lack of centralized, forcibly imposed plan. But an overall plan for humanity is all that the statist has ever considered, and often it is all that he can comprehend. The idea that no one will be in charge, that no one will be making the rules for everyone else, that no one will be planning or managing mankind as a whole, and that no one will be telling the statists what to do, is simply something most authoritarians have never imagined. The concept is so unfamiliar that they do not even know how to process it, so they desperately try to fit the idea of anarchy, a stateless society, into the mold of a master plan. Such contradictory thinking is only reinforced by those who wear the label of anarcho-communist. Oh, I never heard of them. The term implies that there would be no ruling class and that the society would be organized into a collectivist system. It's a contradiction in itself, right? Anarcho-communist. Of course, if some group claims the right to forcibly impose such a system on everyone else, that is authoritarianism. And so the anarcho part of the term would not apply. Another option I'm sorry, Anon, I don't understand where your quote comes from. Who said anything about helping corporations? Quote from Anon, I understand wanting to get rid of the state, but I don't understand the idea of helping the corporations. Where did you get that from? Blah, blah. Another option. Yeah. No, Vince, don't worry about it. Another option is that those calling themselves anarcho-communist are merely hoping that, in the absence of a ruling class, every single individual on the planet will freely choose and participate in communes of collective wish, which of course would not happen. I'm sorry, I don't get this sentence. No, I would disagree with that. Anon is just saying that, well, corporations and governments work together, right? Okay, so far so good. But without the government, they are free to rape people all they want. No. That's... It depends on yourself, right? For instance, I'll give you an example. There was this brewery here in the Netherlands that thought it was a good idea to make a beer without alcohol in it, right? And a stand-up comedian made a joke about it on television, and that had such an impact that nobody wanted to buy the beer anymore. And so it, just disappeared from the market, right? Maybe a bad example, but still. We decide what corporations you buy your stuff from, right? If you go to moms and pops to buy stuff, for instance, I know in the United States, those are more or less wanted by people that dare call themselves a rake, right? Instead of Walmart, right? You decide that yourself, right? That's the spirit of America, right? You should be able to make as much money as you are able to. If you are such a good person that you can calm people into buying your stuff, which they don't need, well, that's America, right? It's called capitalism, right? People should be aware of what they buy. It's not the corporation's fault, it's the people's fault themselves. Right? Anon says it's the corporations want trans-Pacific partnership, transatlantic Pacific. No, what is it? What's TPP stand for? What kind of partnership is that? Private, public nonsense, right? I don't think it's the corporations that want that. It's the it's hard to say, but there are I would say that it's the let me find the word here. It's something like technocrats, but technocracy. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about, right? This sprung up for the first time in 1930. What's it? What's the name called again? It's a rule by experts. Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yeah, Anon. That has nothing to do with corporations. This has to do with a global the road to one world is that. That's what it is, right? And so why would a Dutch corporation, for instance, want that? You know, a Dutch businessman does not want to compete with Chinese, you know, because he knows that the Chinese crap is much cheaper than he can ever make it. Right? So this has nothing to do with the corporations wanting that. I doubt very much that American corporations want all this, because it would be the downfall of them. Global corporations wrote the TPP, says Anon. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. All right, so there might be a few of them that have already got a global monopoly on things, but not all of them, right? When you say like corporations, I'm thinking all corporations. Every individual that has even the smallest business, right? But sure, there are corporations that want that. If they already have a monopoly all over the world, then I could, you know, imagine that they are for this one world government, right? But a smart businessman in the West would not want such a thing. He has to compete with all these lower wage countries that can make stuff much cheaper. Anon says there are only a few people who are on the boards of all the major global corporations. Yes. So now you're bringing it down to only a few people. All right, you know, that's a better explanation, right? All right, I don't understand that word, Anon. Liability, liable. Limited liability is what's wrong with all corporations. I need definitions for those words. I'm sorry, my English is just not that good. I don't know what limited liability is, and I don't know what exactly do you think a corporation is. You know, a corporation to me is like a business owner, or what? Would you call that something else? And what is limited liability? Do I need to type it in the Google, or are you gonna define your terms, Anon? All right. Yeah, liability is what you can get sued over. So what now? You need the government again to step in, right? So what's going on here, right? You're gonna call on the cops and say, "Whoa, blah 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 blah." It's a tough discussion we're having here, right? I mean, first you say, well, it's okay to get rid of government, but then you say, well, liability is not in order because people, they have to be able to sue. Well, don't you need government for that? So now it's getting a bit of contradictory, right? Anon says the reason you incorporate is to avoid responsibility. So you don't lose your house if your business kills someone. So that's like in Holland. We have the difference between what we call NV and BV. And with NV, if that is the kind of business you have, you yourself can be put in front of a judge, and if you've caused so much damage that your business can't pay for it, you can actually lose your house and car and everything. With a BV, that's not possible, right? So I understand what the difference is now. Alright, let's pick this up where we left off. As a final possibility, perhaps the anarcho-communist would, for themselves, choose to be part of a commune, but would allow others to choose different arrangements. By the way, Anon, you can also call in, Just contact me via Skype at Solvinur, and it goes for everybody, especially those people in the chat, since they're already interacting. For you guys, it's an even smaller step. You just start up your Skype, send me a contact request at Solvinur, which would be my name, in the chat room. Solvinur, that's how you spell it. And I will get you on the radio so we can talk about this instead of me having to read all of these very small, tiny letters. That's a different Anon, says, can't lump all things together. Well, via Skype. Contact me first. Can't lump all things together. That's like saying 1/3 ruins the punch bowl, or the punch bowl ruins the third. Okay, I don't get that. Keep the third out of the punch bowl and the punch functions like it's supposed to function, and the thirds function like it's supposed to function. Never mix thirds and punch. Alright, Anon. I'm sorry, I don't seem to get your point. Yeah. So, if you want to join in, just contact me at Skype, SOLVINUR. Meanwhile, I'm going to see where we left off here. In the end, the term anarcho-communist makes little sense, and it is actually a symptom of authoritarianism. Even when advocating a stateless society, some people automatically imagine that there must be some overarching system or plan, some grand scheme, some form of societal management which must be imposed upon mankind as a whole. The truth is, with or without the myth of authority, no one can guarantee justice or prosperity, or predict everything that might occur, or know every problem that might arise or how to solve them all. The difference is that those who believe in authority continue to pretend, despite constant overwhelming evidence to the contrary, that an authoritarian system of control can guarantee safety, security, prosperity, fairness, and justice. Meanwhile, those who have given up the most dangerous superstition no longer pretend that it is possible to control everything and everyone via any system. Bizarrely, despite the nearly incomprehensible degree of economic disaster, human suffering and mass oppression which the belief in government has repeatedly caused, proponents of authoritarianism still insist that those who oppose statism must be able to describe in minute detail exactly how everything in society would work in the absence of government, so that nothing bad could possibly happen. Yeah. Like it doesn't happen if government is in control, right? And if they cannot, and of course no one can, the statist then proclaims that as proof that anarchy will never work. Rather than being a rational conclusion, such an idea is a symptom of deep-seated mental dependency and fear of the unknown. Statists want the promise that some all-knowing, all-powerful entity will take care of them and protect them from all possible misfortune, from all of the bad people in the world. The fact that politicians have been making such promises forever and have never once actually fulfilled such a promise, because the promise is patently ridiculous, does not stop statists from wanting to hear the promise. Alright, let me drink a bit of coffee here. No matter how many times authoritarian solutions fail horrendously, most people think that some other government plan is the only answer. What they want is a guarantee that some all-powerful entity outside of themselves will make sure that their lives are comfortable and safe. They do not seem to care or even notice that such guarantees never come true, and that anyone claiming the power to make such a guarantee is either an amazingly bold liar or a lunatic. Nonetheless, because anarchists and voluntarists have never made the absurd promise that without government nothing bad will ever happen, most statists remain terrified of the idea of a stateless society. Stateless society? Huh. I'm thinking like state, because I learned this from William Roberts, right? The state is the people. Society seems also to be made up of people, so I'm just thinking, how do I understand this term correctly, right? William Roberts explains it as follows: if there were no people, there would be no state, right? So the state is the people. And here comes another personal note from Clark and Rose. I have found that whenever the topic of a stateless society comes up in my discussion with statists, almost without fail, they begin asking questions in the passive voice. How will this get done? How will this be handled? They speak as if, even when it comes to their own lives, they are little more than spectators, waiting to see what will happen. This is because for many of their formative years, especially while in school, they were little more than spectators. The script of their lives were written by others. Their destiny was determined and decided by authority, not by themselves. So, in an effort to get them to escape that mindset, When they ask me something like, under anarchy, how will this be dealt with? I respond, how would you deal with it? When they ask, what would be done about this potential problem? I ask, what would you do about it? And they can usually come up with ideas off the top of their heads that are better than any authoritarian solution. The problem is not that they are incapable of being in charge of themselves, their futures, and in fact the future of the world. The problem is that it has just never occurred to them that they already are in charge of themselves, their futures, and the future of the world. So far, Locke and Rose's personal note. One who understands that authority is a myth does not have any obligation to explain how every aspect of a free society would work, any more than someone who says that Santa Claus is not real has some obligation to explain how Christmas will work without him. However, statists often insist, as a condition of even considering the possibility of a stateless society, that someone tell them how every aspect of everyone's life will work without government. Of course, no one knows, with or without the myth of government, what all will happen, and clinging to a provably false, self-contradictory myth, which itself has led to large-scale murder, extortion and oppression, because someone failed to describe in detail a perfect world without the myth, is absurd. People can make suggestions or predictions about how different aspects of a free society would work without the involvement of authority, and many scholarly treatises do exactly that. But once someone truly understands the insanity inherent in any belief in authority, he will never go back to accepting the myth regardless of what he thinks might happen without it. Any more than an adult would go back to believing in Santa Claus because he does not know whether Christmas would work without him. Which brings us to the next heading, which is called You Rule You, I Rule Me. By definition, in the Hey Captain Proton, how you doing, buddy? By definition, in the absence I need to drink some coffee. Everybody attention, Captain on the bridge. Yeah. By definition, in the absence of authority, no one will have the power or the right to proclaim, this is how things will be done. Yet that is the only template of thought which most authoritarians have ever considered. Those who realize that they have neither the ability nor the right to control all of humanity do not think in terms of a master plan for the human race. Instead, they think in terms of the only thing that they can truly control, their own actions. Yeah, I'm doing okay, Capt. Thank you. Instead, they think in I already did that. They think in terms of, what should I do about this, instead of, what should I ask the masters to do about this? They are not so arrogant or delusional that they think they have the right or the ability to make choices for all of mankind. They make their own choices and accept the unavoidable reality that other people will make different choices. On a practical level, it is absurd to expect that a system of centralized control, wherein a handful of politicians with their limited understanding and experience come up with a master plan and then force it on everyone else, would work better than comparing and combining the knowledge, ingenuity and expertise of hundreds of millions of individuals via a network of mutually voluntary trade and cooperation. No matter what the goal is, whether it is food production, road building, protection against aggressors, or anything else, the idea that comes from chaos of millions of people trying different inventions and solutions will always be better than the ideas which a handful of politicians will come up with. This is especially true in light of the fact that while politicians force their ideas on everyone via the law, even if they are lousy ideas that no one else likes, free market ideas have to be good enough that others will voluntarily support them. Right? Despite the amazing prosperity already created by relatively free anarchist trade and mutual cooperation, the thought, I think that's supposed to say the thought, it says the though, but the thought of people coexisting without all of them being controlled and regulated by some master plan is still incomprehensible to most statists. Most statists have never even begun to contemplate the possibility of truly being in charge of their own lives. Everything about modern authoritarian society trains people to be loyal subjects of a system of control, instead of training people to or what they should be. Sovereign entities, figuring out things for themselves. Alright, so is there a little contradiction in here? Is it even possible to train people to be sovereign? You know, those two terms seem a bit contradictory to me. Figuring things out for themselves, interacting with others as equals, answerable to their own consciences above all else. To most, the idea of a world where they are the ones who have to solve problems, settle dispute, help those who need help, protect themselves and others, without being able to run to an all-powerful authority instead, is a completely foreign and terrifying concept. They love to advocate authoritarian solutions, but do not really even want to be in charge of themselves, much less to be personally responsible for making society work. And their belief in authority is what they use to attempt to evade that responsibility and avoid the realities of life. The life of a caged animal, in many ways, is easier than the life in the wild. Likewise, life as an unthinking human slave can be more predictable and feel safer than a life of responsibility. But, just as living in the wild makes animals stronger, smarter, and far better able to care for themselves, letting go of the authority myth will force human beings to be smarter, more creative, more compassionate, and more moral. That is not to say that all people will, without the belief in government, be wise, kind, and generous. But if millions of individuals each understood that it is up to them personally to make the world a better place, instead of merely obediently playing an assigned part in someone else's master plan, while crying to government to fix everything, it would unleash a level of human creativity, ingenuity, and cooperation beyond what most people could possibly imagine. Which brings us to the next heading, which is called A Different Society. Today, most people associate the idea of everyone doing whatever he wants with chaos and death, and associate everyone being obedient and law-abiding with order and civilization. Without the authority myth, however, people would have a very different mindset. Without an authority to blindly follow and obey, without being able to whine to the powers that be to fix everything, people would have to figure out for themselves what is right and wrong and how to solve problems. Hold on, guys. Some might claim that human beings are too short-sighted, lazy and irresponsible to run their own lives. But it is precisely the belief in authority that has allowed them to become so lazy and helpless. As long as they believed that making things right was not their job, that fixing problems was not their job, and that all they needed to do was to obey their masters, acting as unthinking pawns in someone else's master plan, they had no need to grow up. But shedding the superstition forces one into the position of realizing that there is nothing on earth above him, which means that he is responsible for his own actions, or inaction. He is the one whose job it is to make the world a better place. He is the one who has to make society work. There are certainly already statists who are trying to make a positive difference, but more often than not their belief in authority converts their good intentions into evil actions, perverts their compassion into violence, and turns their productivity into the fuel of oppression. For example, many people who join the armed forces start with the noble goal of defending their countrymen from hostile foreign powers, and many of those who become police officers do so with the intentions of helping people and protecting the good people from the bad people. However, once they become agents of the mythical beast known as government, they immediately cease to be advocates of their own values and their own perceptions of right and wrong, and instead become enforcers of the arbitrary whims of politicians. In every government in history, those purporting to be defenders have quickly, if not immediately, transformed into aggressors. The first act of almost every regime is to impose some sort of taxation to forcibly rob its subjects, usually under the asinine excuse that it must do so in order to be able to protect the people against robbers. It is, therefore, ironic that so many people accept the idea that government is the only entity capable of protecting the good from the wicked. In truth, only the absence of the superstition of authority only in the absence of the superstition of authority can the good intentions of would-be protectors and defenders actually serve humanity. A private militia, for example, formed for the purpose of defending a certain population against foreign invaders, which is not imagined by its members or by anyone else to have any special authority whatsoever, will be guided by the personal conscience of each individual member. Right. Such an organization can be an extremely effective means of exerting justified defensive force, while being immune to the usual corruptibility of authoritarian protection rackets. A private militia member who did not suffer from the authority delusion could not and would not ever use the excuse of just following orders to try to deny responsibility for his own actions. If he uses violence, he and everyone around him knows that he personally made the choice. Hey, Hopper, what you doing? If he uses violence, I already did that. and that he is responsible personally for it and should personally be held accountable for his actions. In short, the only time a private, non-authoritarian militia could become oppressive is if every individual in it personally chose to act that way. In contrast, government militaries can become oppressive as a result of even one genuinely malicious person in the chain of command, if those beneath him have been effectively trained to faithfully follow orders. Alright. Hold on, guys. Let's see. Yeah, let's do this one. It's a bit long, but I'm gonna do it anyway. This one. Let's go.
This weekend. It's been awesome. Folks, we threw a kick-ass party, man. We had great bands, we had great speakers, we had great people here. Cool campers, freedom lovers, family lovers, God lovers, country lovers. It's all good, man. Spread the word.
Why did you do this?
Why did I do this?
Why did you do this?
Because I want to live in a free world, not a tyrannical Bolshevik slave state, man. You know, all the wrong Bolsheviks are in the right police state positions to do to America what happened to Russia. And I'm trying everything in my power and our band's power to make sure that doesn't happen. So that was me. Nice. We are Poker Face. We thank you for being participants of Freedompalooza 2012. We're gonna kick you off with a little warm-up song called Illuminati. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Alright, that was a bit shorter than I expected. That was Poker Face Freedom Palooza in 2012. Welcome back, everybody. Let's pick this up where we left off. Without the myth of authority, not everyone will act responsible or charitable. But when each person accepts that he is in charge of himself, it is far less likely that good people will be doing the bidding of evil people, as happens constantly now, by way of the belief in authority. Statists are often afraid of what some individual may do if not restrained by government. What they should fear, however, is what those individuals may do if they become government. The amount of damage which one hostile malicious individual can do by himself is nothing compared to the damage that one hostile malicious authority figure can do, by way of obedient, but otherwise good people. To put it another way, if evil was only committed by evil people, the world would be a far better place than it is today, with basically good people constantly committing evil acts because of a perceived authority told them to. Next heading, a different kind of rules. Without a belief in government, communities would almost certainly develop rules, which, at first glance, might resemble what are now called laws. But there would be a fundamental difference. It is both legitimate and useful to write down and publish for all to see statements about the consequences of doing certain things. People in one town may, for example, make it known that if you get caught stealing in their town, you will be subject to forced labor until you pay back your victim threefold for what you stole. Or the people of some neighborhood make it known that if you are caught driving drunk there, they will take your car and roll it into a lake. But, while such decrees would constitute threats, they would be fundamentally different from what are now called laws for several reasons. He's skipping four reasons. Here we go. 1. The ones actually making the threats, the ones who decided what retribution they personally would feel justified in inflicting on those who harm or endanger their neighbors, would only bear the responsibility for making and carrying out such threats. 2. The threats would not require any election or consensus. One person or 1,000 people jointly could issue a warning in the form of, "If I catch you doing this, I will do this to you." The threats would not be seen as the will of the people, but only as a statement of the intentions of those actually issuing the warning. 3. The legitimacy of such threats would be judged not by who made the threats, but by whether the threatened consequence, in the eyes of the observer, is appropriate for the crime committed. No one would feel any obligation to agree with or abide by such a threat if they deemed it to be unfair or unjustified. 4. Such warnings would not pretend to alter morality or make up new crimes, nor would anyone imagine such warnings to be legitimate simply because they were issued, the way people now view authoritarian laws. Instead, such warnings would simply constitute statements about what those making the threats believe to be justified. Therefore, instead of being in the authoritarian formula of "we hereby make the following illegal," the warning would fit into this template. "I believe that if you do this, I have the right to respond in this way." Hamsack, hey, how you doing, buddy? Many people, having been trained into... Sorry about that. Many people, having been trained into authority worship, would be terrified of such a non-centralized free-for-all method of human interaction. But what if, the statist will ask, someone writes a threat that says, if I don't like your religion or your hairstyle or your dietary choices, I'll kill you. Examining that question in the context of a society still suffering from the superstition of authority, and in the context of a society without such a belief, shows just how dangerous the authoritarian superstition really is. It is true that in the absence of the belief in government, an individual could threaten violence in unjustified situations. The point is not that everyone will automatically think and behave properly if there are no rulers, but that such malicious tendencies in human beings would be far less dangerous and destructive without the belief in authority to legitimize them. For example, compare what happens when some individuals vehemently oppose alcohol consumption and when authority forbids it. It is possible, if unlikely, that an individual in a stateless society could on his own declare, I consider consuming alcohol to be a sin, and if I find out you've been drinking, I'm coming to your house with a gun to straighten you out. Any person who did so would almost certainly be persuaded, if not by polite reasoning, then by the threat of retaliatory violence, that he should not carry through on his threat and should stop making such threats. Obviously, one person could not by himself inflict oppression upon millions of beer drinkers. Even among others, who also consider drinking alcohol to be a sin, even if it was a majority, few would feel justified in trying to forcibly impose their view onto others, whether they recognize that such aggression is unjustified, or whether they were simply scared of what might be done to them if they tried. Either way, violent conflict would be avoided. In contrast, suppose a group of people wearing the label of government declare alcohol to be illegal and created a heavily armed gang of enforcers to hunt down and imprison any caught possessing alcohol. Since that actually happened, there is no need to theorize about the results. With the promise of fixing the most of society's ills and with public support, the US ruling class enacted alcohol prohibition in 1920. Alcohol consumption continued, slightly reduced, and there immediately sprang up a black market in alcohol production and distribution. A hugely profitable but illegal market led to violent conflicts, a jump in organized crime and other crime, and widespread corruption in government, as well as brutal attempts to crush the alcohol trade. Seeing the actual results of prohibition, a majority of the people soon opposed it and demanded the repeal of the 18th Amendment, which authorized prohibition at the federal level. And of course, after prohibition ended, all of the related violence, government violence and private violence, ended. Good example, right? Alright, control another second. In this example and countless others, it can be seen that, left to their own devices, most people will not try to forcibly impose their preferences upon others, but will go out of their way to avoid violent conflicts. However, if there is a government that people can use to coercively inflict their values upon others, they will gladly beg it to do so, and feel no shame or guilt for having done so. If every person who made or attempted to enforce a threat, or rule as it might be called, had to take personal responsibility for having done so, and had to assume the risk himself, very few people would be so eager to threaten their neighbors. But given the vehicle of authority, everyone who believes in government threatens all of his neighbors on a regular basis and accepts none of the responsibility and assumes none of the risk for having done so. In short, the belief in authority makes everyone who believes in it into a thug and a coward. Next heading. Organizing without authority. Having mentioned the way in which human society would change absent the authority myth, it is equally important to note the things which would not change. For some reason, some people seem to think that anarchy, a society without a ruling class, equates to every man for himself, with every person having to grow his own food, build his own house, and so on. The implication of such a belief is that human cooperation and trade occur only because someone is in charge. Of course, this is not the case, and never has been. People trade and cooperate for mutual benefit, as can be seen in many millions of businesses and transactions which already occur without any government involvement. Supermarkets are examples of highly organized, amazingly efficient means of distributing food, which involve many thousands of individuals, none of whom is coerced into participating, but each of whom does so for his own benefit. Everyone, from the farmers to the truck driver, to the stock boys, to the checkout clerk, to the store manager, the owner of the entire store change, does what he needs, does what he does, because he receives personal gain for doing so. No one is legally required to produce one bite of food for anyone else. And yet hundreds of millions of people are fed, and fed well, with a large variety of food products, of high quality but at a low price. But what is essentially an what is essentially an anarchistic system of food production and distribution. This is the result of human nature and simple economics. Yeah. You are invited to paste some more information about them, Ham, and I will be glad to read it on air. Please supply also a source for the information. Yeah. I mean, this was also, even my father was talking about them, you know? When I overheard him talking to his fellow businessman, because, you know, I come from a business family, right? My grandmother and father were business people. My uncles were business people. My father is a businessman, and he was talking to them about history, and at some point he mentioned the Bolsheviks, and I was like, "What the heck are Bolsheviks?" You know, I never heard of that term before. And at a certain point, a couple of weeks later, I found out that, you know, he was not the only one talking like that. I noticed in society, I don't remember specifically where, but I noticed in society that people did not like Jews, and I was like, why is that? You know, just as a child, well, how old was I? 6 or 7 or so. And so I was driving in my car with my dad one day, and I asked, why do people don't like the Jews, you know? And he said, well, because they are good with money. And I thought, well, is that it? Is that the only thing, you know? Is that why they don't like him? Then there must be jealous people, right? Anyway, that was the end of that inquiry. This is the result of human nature and simple economics. Where there is a need for some product or service, there is money to be made providing it. And where the money is to be made, there will be a number of people or groups of people competing for that money by trying to make products that are better and cheaper. Such a system, which is really not a system at all, automatically punishes those whose products are inferior or too costly, and rewards those who find a way to provide people with what they want at a better price. And giving up the authority myth would not hamper that in the slightest. Yeah, that's what I heard also. Bolsheviks were mostly Jews. It fits the Talmudic law. Now, I never read any of those laws. Talmud is a book, right? 90% of the Bolsheviks that overthrew the Tsar were Jews financed with Western banks' money. Yeah, that's where Trotsky comes in, right, Ham? I'm still trying to confirm that, right? Yeah. Trotsky from New York. He went to Russia, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. In fact, the authority superstition is constantly interfering with people who attempt to organize for mutual benefit by throwing taxes, licensing requirements, regulations, inspectors. Regulations, inspectors, and other legal obstacles in the way. Even laws supposedly intended to protect consumers usually do nothing but limit the options available to consumers. The end result is that many businessmen who otherwise would have to focus on making a better product at a better price instead focus on lobbying those in government to do things which handicap or destroy competing businesses. Because the mechanism of government is always to use the use of force, it can never help with competition. It can only hinder it. In other words, rather than being essential to an organized society, the myth of authority is the biggest obstacle to human beings organizing for mutual benefit. Next heading is defense without authority. Those who insist that government is necessary often raise the issue of defense and protection, claiming that society without government would mean that anyone could do anything, that there would be no standard of behavior, no rules, no consequences for those who choose to commit theft or murder, and that society would therefore collapse into constant violence and mayhem. Yeah. Mensheviks, I've never heard of them. Such concerns, however, are based on a profound misunderstanding of human nature and of what government is and what it is not. Defending against aggressors requires no special authority, no legislation, no law, and no law enforcers. Defensive force is inherently justified, regardless of who does it, and regardless of what any law says. And having a formal, organized means of providing such a defensive force for a community also does not require government or law. Each individual has the right to defend himself or defend someone else. He may choose to hire someone else to provide defensive services, either because he is physically unable to defend himself or just because he would rather pay someone else to do it. And if a number of people choose to pay to have an organization of trained fighters, with the weapons, vehicles, buildings and other resources they need to defend an entire town, the people have that right as well. At this point, most believers in government will protest saying, "That's all government is." But that is not the case, and this is where the difference becomes apparent. What an individual does not have the right to do, what no group of people, no matter how large, has any right to do, is to hire someone else, individual or group, to do something which any average individual does not have the right to do. They cannot rightfully hire someone to commit robbery, even if they call it taxation, because the average individual has no right to steal. They cannot rightfully hire someone to spy on and forcibly control the choices of behavior of their neighbors, even if they call it regulation. Those in stateless society would feel justified in hiring someone to use force only in very limited ways, and in very limited situations in which every individual has the right to use force, to defend against aggressors. In contrast, most of what the so-called protectors in government do is to commit acts of aggression, not defend against them. Some of what is now classified as police work, in fact, all of what the police do, is actually legitimate, noble, righteous, and helpful to society, would exist without the authority mist. Investigating wrongdoing and apprehending actual criminals, meaning people who harm others, not merely people who disobey politicians, would continue without the authority myth, as something that almost everyone would want and would be willing to pay for. This is demonstrated by the fact that there are already private detectives and private security companies, in addition to the protection services of government that everyone is forced to fund. There would be only one difference, though it is a major difference. Those doing the job of investigating and protecting in the absence of the authority superstition would always be viewed as having exactly the same rights as everyone else, while presumably they would be better equipped and better qualified to do their jobs than the average citizen. I'm starting to lose my voice. Their actions would be judged by the same standards that the actions of anyone else would be judged, which is not at all the case with so-called law enforcers. Alright, I'm gonna play some more Poker Face, guys. Give my voice some rest.
Give me a 3-4. This is a public service announcement. Your country is being sold out right from under you, and your government is doing everything to make that possible. You are nothing but serfs on their global plantation. What are you going to do about it? You're going to continue being a slave. You're going to wake up. see. What's not to see? Yeah. What's not to hear? Speak.
Poker face! Alright, welcome back everybody. And that was Poker Face, listener. Alright. Private protection providers would also judge their own actions, not by whether some authority had told them to do something, or whether their actions were deemed legal by government, but by whether those actions, in their own personal view, were inherently justified. Not only would an excuse of just following orders not convince the general public, but the agents themselves could not, even in their own minds, use such an excuse to evade responsibility for their actions. Because no one would be claiming to be an authority over them. Non-authoritarian police, if they would even be called that, would be viewed very differently than government agents are now. They would not be seen to have the right to do anything that any other person did not have the right to do. They could only go places, question people, use force, or do anything else in situations where anyone else would be justified in doing the same thing. As a result, the average person would have no reason to feel any nervousness or self-consciousness in their presence, as most people now do when in the presence of law enforcers. People would feel no more obligation to submit to questioning or searches or anything else requested by private protectors than they would if some stranger on the street made such request. And if a private protector became abusive or even violent, his victims would have the right to respond the same way he would if anyone else was behaving that way. More importantly, the individual who resisted aggression from a private protector would have the support of his neighbors if he did so, because his neighbors would not be imagining any obligation to bow to someone because of a badge or any law. The best check against the defense organization becoming corrupt or out of control is the ability of customers to simply stop paying. Obviously, no one wants to pay for some gang to oppress him, but most people also do not want to pay a gang to oppress someone else either. As much as the average person wants to see thieves and murderers caught and stopped, he also wants to see to it that the innocent are not harmed. If the customer of some private protection company discovered that their protectors were harassing and assaulting innocent people, the type of behavior they were hired to prevent, the customer base would instantly disappear and the thugs would be out of business. And, in the absence of any claimed authority, the thugs decided to try to force their former customers to keep paying. The backlash from the people would be swift and severe, as no one would feel any legal obligation to allow themselves to be oppressed. A non-authoritarian protection system would also lack another particularly ludicrous aspect of nearly all government forms of defense. It is standard not only for government to force people to fund defense schemes, but to refuse to even tell the people what they are funding. The US government, in particular the CIA, though many other agencies also engage in secret operations, has spent decades and trillions of dollars, much of which still remains unaccounted for, on operations its customer, the American people, are prohibited from knowing about. Menshevik is a member of the non-Leninist wing of the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, opposed to the Bolsheviks and defeated by them after the overthrow of the Tsar in 1917. Aha. Source Wikipedia. Thank you, Hans. Indeed, anyone who tried to tell the American people what all they are funding would be imprisoned, or worse, for causing a breach of national security. With nearly unlimited power, nearly unlimited funds, and permission to do all of its deeds in secret, it is utterly absurd to imagine that the military and the CIA would only do useful, righteous things. Indeed, more and more the American people are learning that the CIA has for decades engaged in drug running and gun running, really fast, torture, assassination, buying influence with foreign governments, installing puppet dictators, and all sorts of other destructive and evil practices. Even President Harry Truman, who created the CIA, later stated that he never would have done so if he had known it would become the American Gestapo. Now that's a contradiction to what Hans is saying. Were they working with or against? Yeah? Who do we trust, Wikipedia or Hamsack? Ah. So they might have worked together before and after then they were not. Alright. Any private company that offered protection or defense services would get no customers at all if its sales pitch was, if you give us huge sums of money, we will protect you. We just won't tell you what you're paying for, and we won't tell you what we do or how we do it. The only reason government gets funding based on such ridiculous premise is because it gets money through violent coercion, not voluntary trade. The people are not given a choice of whether to fund it or not. There is another preposterous aspect of protection via government which would never occur with private defense and protection providers. Under the guise of gun control and other weapons, laws, authoritarian regimes often forcibly prevent the people from being able to defend themselves, while making the ridiculous claim that it is being done for the safety of the very people being disarmed. Yeah, it's insane, right? Those in power know full well that a disarmed public is a helpless public, and that it is precisely what tyrants want. The idea that a person who does not mind violating laws against theft or murder is going to mind violating weapons laws is absurd. Crime statistics and common sense both demonstrate that passing a law against private weapon ownership will affect only the law-abiding, while with the result being that basically good people will end up less able to defend themselves against aggressors. And that is exactly what politicians want, because they have the biggest, most powerful gang of aggressors around. Needless to say, if someone is looking for protection, I guess I should say, against aggressors, he will not voluntarily pay a company to forcibly take away his own means of self-defense. Furthermore, violent clashes between the police and civilians would obviously be reduced or non-existent if the people could simply stop funding any protectors that became aggressors. For example, much of the racial tensions and violence in the United States history were the result of white law enforcers oppressing and abusing black civilians. Is that so? Rather than law acting as a civilian influence, it was used as the excuse for violent aggression. Given a choice, the inhabitants of a black neighborhood obviously would not have voluntary paid to have racist, sadistic white thugs intimidating and assaulting them on a regular basis. Yeah, why do you have to choose the white people here? Many other violent clashes in the United States and elsewhere have also been the result of people upset with what their ruling class was doing to them. Yeah. This would include the massacre of thousands of protesters in Tiananmen Square by the Chinese army in 1989, the killings of several anti-war protesters by the National Guard at Kent State, Ohio in 1917, and so on. More and more often in the United States, public demonstrations and protests over government policies end in authoritarian attacks against protesters with tear gas, batons, tasers, rubber bullets, and so on. Obviously, no group of people would willingly pay for a gang that forcibly stops those same people from speaking their minds. More importantly, the motivation behind such protest is almost always displeasure with what government officials are doing against the will of the people, at least some of the people. If each person was allowed to spend his own money instead of being forced to fund the centralized authoritarian agenda, there would be no reason for most of this type of protest, and the resulting clashes to occur at all. A non-authoritarian protector would do only things that he and his customers viewed as justifiable, which would probably be spelled out in a contract form, where the protector agrees to provide specific services for a specific fee. Compare this to the standard government version of protection. We will forcibly take as much of your money as we want, and we will decide what, if anything, we will do for you. Most people want aggressors stopped and the innocent protected. In a free market, the way for a company to succeed is by giving the customers what they want. Unlike government, if a private defense company had to rely on willing customers, it would have a huge incentive not to be careless, wasteful, abusive, or corrupt. If people could take their business elsewhere, there would always be a competition to see who could provide actual justice most effectively. For a private protection company to succeed, it would have to demonstrate to its customers that it is very good at figuring out who is guilty and who is not. It is very good at making sure that the innocent are not harassed, assaulted, or slandered. It is very good at making sure that the truly dangerous people are caught and prevented from doing further harm. It is very good at making sure that the victims of crimes receive whatever restitution is possible. And it is very good at making it so that those who have done something wrong but do not need to be completely removed from society are put in an environment where their attitude and behavior can actually improve. In contrast, government prosecutors specialized in always demonizing the accused and always have an incentive to get convictions, or the coerced confessions known as plea bargains. Regardless of the guilt or innocence of the accused, government courts constantly release people who still pose an obvious danger to others, while keeping millions of people locked up who have harmed no one. The government prison system, because of how prisoners are degraded, abused and assaulted by guards as well as other inmates, makes frustrated, angry people into people who are even more frustrated and angry, making innocent people into criminals and making criminals into worse criminals. And the American people are coerced into funding that destructive system whether they want to or not. Another important point is that, in case of a private protection company, if one protector becomes abusive, the reputation and career of every other protector depends upon exposing and rooting out the thug. In contrast, it is now universally understood that government police forces will, first and foremost, protect their own. When one cop is caught doing something corrupt, illegal or violent, almost without exception, all of the other cops will help to cover it up or defend it. They function based upon gang mentality, because the people who are forced to pay their salaries are not the people they actually have to answer to. Like most government employees, they answer to the politicians and view the general public as cattle, not customers. In contrast, the general public would view private defenders as their friends, their allies, and their employees, and more importantly as their equals. They would not view them as an authority they must grovel before, nor as a constant potential threat to be feared. Everyone, including the hired protector, would recognize that the protector has no more rights than anyone else. Everyone would know that if a hired protector ever committed theft or assault or murder, he would be viewed and treated exactly as another thug would be viewed and treated. A genuine protector who defends liberty and property not only does not require a belief in authority, he requires an absence of that belief. One who imagines himself to have the right to forcibly control everyone else, even if only in a limited way, is going to treat people accordingly. The law enforcer who hands out tickets for obscure infractions, detains and interrogates people without just cause, and seems always looking for a reason to interfere with people's daily lives, is not a protector and deserves no respect or cooperation. A non-authoritarian protector, on the other hand, would be nothing more than a normal human being, with the same rights as everyone else, though perhaps more often armed and better trained in physical combat than most. He would be viewed as the neighbor to call if there is trouble, rather than the agent of a gang of thugs which, first and foremost, serves the ruling class. And the job of protector, absent any special authority, power or status, would mainly attract those who truly want to protect the innocent, but would not attract those who merely want the chance to exercise power and control over others, a human shortcoming which the job of modern law enforcement feeds. This is not to say that private protectors would never do anything wrong. They would still be human, capable of bad judgment, negligence, and even malicious intent, just like everyone else. However, they would not have the legal permission to do wrong, and would have no system, no law, no authority, which they could blame for their actions, or which they could hide behind to avoid the wrath of their victims. If they ever acted as aggressors, retribution against them would be certain and swift. In a population that has given up the superstition of authority, any group of protectors which decided to become a group of extortionists, thugs and tyrants would not be voted again, or sued, or complained about to some authority. They would be shot. The only thing that allows for the prolonged, widespread oppression of any armed populace is the belief in authority among the victims of oppression. Without that, it is possible to subdue or dominate them for long. Next heading is deterrence and incentives. Some assume that, if not for government, crooks would be free to do as they please without any repercussions. Again, this shows a profound misunderstanding of human nature and of what government is. In truth, the belief in authority adds nothing to the effectiveness of any system of defense and protection. People who use aggression against others, such as assault, theft, and murder, obviously are not restrained by their own morality or respect for the self-ownership of their victims. However, they may choose not to commit a particular crime if they imagine a risk of harm to themselves. This is called deterrence. And deterrence, by definition, do not depend upon appealing to the conscience of the attacker, but instead make use of the attacker's instinct for self-preservation. To put it bluntly, the message which works on true criminals is not, do not do that because it's wrong. The message is, do not do that or you will get hurt. The supposed moral righteousness or authority of the threat against a would-be aggressor is irrelevant to the effectiveness of the deterrent. Whether it is a police officer, a dog, an angry homeowner, or even another thief, the only question in the attacker's mind is whether he is likely to suffer pain or death if he attempts to rob or attack someone. Deterrence to other types of bad behavior, which are not so severe or blatant as theft or assault, also do not require authority. Some assert that without government inspectors and regulators, every business would be putting out shoddy, dangerous products. But such a claim is again based upon a profound misunderstanding of human nature and economics. No matter how greedy or selfish a businessman may be, he cannot be successful in the long run if he sells products which do not please his customers. Someone who knowingly sells a defective product or tainted food will have few, if any, customers. The many highly expensive recalls which many companies voluntarily carry out, even for relatively trivial defects or problems, attests to this fact. Unlike in the current situation, in which the power of government is used to prop up and protect irresponsible and destructive corporations, in a truly free market, with informed consumers and an open competition, corruption and crime would not pay, and businesses would be unable to insulate themselves from the consequences of their irresponsibility. Government inspectors and law regulators are driven by incentive to impose fines on people and to enforce laws and regulations, regardless of whether they make any sense. In contrast, a system of private inspectors, which answers only to the people who know, which answers only to the people who want to know what is safe, and which has no enforcement power, has no incentive to interfere with business or to make up things to complain about it. Businesses could voluntarily invite private reviews of their products or facilities, such as is already done by underwriters' laboratories, consumer reports and others, in order to be able to show the public an unbiased opinion of how safe and reliable their products are. Many companies do this today, on top of having to jump through all of the bureaucratic hoops which government puts in their way. Many other matters could be handled in similar non-authoritarian way. Private building inspectors, already used by many realty companies, would have the job of determining on behalf of potential buyers how safe and sound a building is. In addition to private inspectors, restaurants could simply invite potential customers to examine their facilities themselves. All of these actions would be voluntary. A business could choose not to allow any inspections, and potential customers could choose whether or not to patronize that business. All right. A memory facility that can hold 400 football fields? Wow. That's a lot. People in the chat room are Anon 37001. Captain Proton is still on the deck. Hecty just arrived. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Hopper, how you doing? JJ, who seems to be AFK, haven't seen him type a lot. Joe Friday, hey buddy. Jules is there for 900 and somewhat minutes, rode even more. Vincent, who also has a radio event at UCY TV, I can also see in chat room. And Hans, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Anons. Thanks a lot for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Take care, everybody.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of scientific